Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Ruby AI podcast. I'm your host, Valentino Stoll, and joined by co-host Joe Leo.
Hi, I'm Joe Leo. I have one question for my co-host. Whose contract is larger, Juan Soto's contract with the New York Mets or your contract to be an AI engineer at Gusto?
You know, I wish I could be categorized with all these AI engineers. Unfortunately, my frame of reference is not deep enough in the ML aspect of things to qualify, I think, for $100 million. Yeah,
that seems disappointed. It seems like a matter of positioning. They teach you this when you're going out to the market with a product. It's like, okay, well, if people view you as this, then maybe the product's only worth like $10. But if they view you as this, you get a $200 million signing bonus.
It's all marketing, right?
It's all marketing.
That should just be taught in all high schools, right? A part of the curriculum.
Yeah, exactly.
How to market yourself.
Yeah, how to market. That's horrible. I am thinking, like, I came across this thing. It's called the Metis list. You know, it's the world's top AI researchers. I'll put it here in the show notes. And so it's just ranked list. And, you know, you can see like Ilya there at the top, but then there's also all these names. So I put my email in. I don't know what they're going to send me, but I now can see the top 100 AI engineers ranked, and it's like trading cards. You can try and catch them all.
Well, so what are you gathering up from all this? Just like how many hundreds, billions of dollars are in this list, or?
Yeah, you know, I think it's interesting to note the disparity. I'm not begrudging anybody on this list. I want to be clear about that. We have talked on the show before, I think, about how lucky we are, who are guys of people of a certain age who came to software development from a place of like, hey, this is interesting and I could probably make a decent career. And then all of a sudden, a few years in, software development became the hottest thing, and all of the salaries increased and all of the demand for us increased. No real work on my own part. You know, the industry changed. Now, nobody ever offered me $100 million, but I was able to live a nice life. And so I think that's great. Now I'm seeing this kind of turning, and, you know, it's got to be, there's obviously hype in this, right? Nobody's worth $100 million. It's a matter of scarcity and demand on the parts of these companies that have hundreds of billions of dollars at stake.
When I first saw these deals come out, like Facebook or whatever, you got to think all these deals have to be tied up in equity, just like they would be if you were joining a startup, right?
Yeah.
Are these deals really like that incredible from like that perspective, right? Or is it really just like the same deal with just more stock?
That's a great question. And that also is a good alignment with sports, because sports deals are always, it's all about the number, right? And then when we dig in, we're like, well, this is really just a $20 million deal with a bunch of voidable years at the end of it. And yeah, I think probably the same thing is true here. It's like, yeah, you get a couple $100 million if Meta wins the race, which nobody actually knows what that looks like. Nobody I've talked to. Maybe I should talk to these 100 people that are the smartest people ever. But nobody knows what it looks like to win this AI race, or why. Nobody's been able to satisfactorily answer me why it matters that one company does win. Because so far, with the advent of LLMs, we've seen either incremental or tremendous improvements. But after each improvement, there's always a short period of time when the next model by the next company catches up. It doesn't seem like there is a huge gap or a huge way that somebody can build a moat and become the LLM that the human race uses.
I feel like recently kind of proven with like the DeepSeek releases, right?
Yeah.
Everyone's just like, oh, well, like DeepSeek now is like just as good as OpenAI. Like everybody's going to use it. And it's just like not the case.
Yeah. Well, that's true. That's true.
And not that DeepSeek isn't useful. DeepSeek has great features and tasks that are really well performed by it. But yeah, I feel like it's all about the vendor lock, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like once you get people using it, it necessitates them continue using it.
I think that's a good point. And we were talking about this right before the show started, that what OpenAI built is a consumer tech product. And the efficacy of the LLM behind it really is secondary to the experience that people have using it as a chatbot. So that DeepSeek example is a perfect example. You and I might go out and use the best model for whatever job that is at hand. And we might evaluate the different models, and we might even find a way to objectively determine which one is best. But most people are just reaching for OpenAI because that was the early leader, and everybody went out, myself included, and got themselves an OpenAI subscription so they could use ChatGPT.
We've talked before about, okay, well, how do we test out, all of our processes on different kinds of models, or watch what might happen? Like, how are you doing that with Phoenix today?
The first thing we did, and this is now going back at least 8 or 9 months. And, the whole history of Phoenix is just 1 year. It was called the September experiment when we started. So we're coming up on 1 year. We built a test harness that would run test generation against a number of different repositories. And we had a couple of open source repos. We had a couple of def method repos that we threw in there. I think we had a customer repo that consented to have us do it. And then we could run it against all of these different models. That still exists, but we've found it lacking in the kind of efficacy that we needed because there is so much nuance to the test generation process. And so it's great to say, okay, this works. This one is the best model for generating specs end to end for a code base. But, we just got off the call with a prospect and they've got 1.2 million lines of code. We're not going to just go and generate tests for the entire application. It would cost an absolute fortune. It would take, I don't know how long. And it's not necessary, right? We want to start with high flog scores, high complexity, high dependencies. And so then it becomes like, okay, how well does it do in these different circumstances? And then you throw in what dependencies are being used in that test, what needs to be mocked, what factories are available versus what is not available. And I find it, maybe my engineers don't find it like this, but I find it to be an overwhelming number of variables to accurately say, okay, this one is the best. And so then what happens is there's a lot of circumstantial evidence. Well, this one worked really well for me. So this is my guy, ChatGPT 5. That's my guy. But I talked to somebody else and their guy is, Gemini 4. So it's hard to know.
You make a great point. It's funny, if you dive into the open source large language model world, the first thing you learn is that every model has its own unique way of crafting prompts. There are tricks that you can add to each different one that help signal the model in different ways.
Right.
And so the same is true even of these bigger ones, right? Your GPT-5 prompt probably might not perform as well as a O3 mini or something, just because it was structured in a way that reasoning models would benefit from it. Right. And maybe the GPT-5 model isn't as good at reasoning about the reasoning section of the prompt. Mm-hmm. And then you're just scoffing it up as, oh, this model isn't as good. Right. But really it's well, the prompt needs to be different in order to justify that. And then at that point, how are we managing then? It goes back to there was a talk at the AI engineer conference where somebody was talking about prompts as a compiled language. And basically people are thinking of them as just kind of text that gets hydrated, but really it's a compiled source code in a way with instructions for an LLM to complete. Once you make an update to that, it changes and it recompiles and it needs to work differently. And you then can't use that compiled source code, plug it into Windows 95, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's the same idea. I'm definitely getting behind that. And I don't know. I feel a lot of the prompting strategies, libraries are maybe misaligned in this way, where I was hopeful with the DSpy stuff that we could see maybe some self-improving things, but it's still almost too complicated from an instruction set standpoint to just blanket apply prompts across the board, right?
Yeah, I think you raise a really interesting point. And I'm curious to know in your role now at Gusto, do you have any benchmarks? Do you have any hard and fast ways of saying, okay, new model came out, I'm going to determine whether or not it's better or worse for the use case that we have at hand?
We have many, many different kinds of evaluation test sets, right? So it's always good to have like your core data sets that you're like churning off of for efficacy of whatever you're trying to measure against. And so we do like build some golden data sets around what we're trying to test output for. And yeah, we could swap models in and out. But again, it like circles back to like, well, are we going to spend the time to try and like re-prompt all these prompts that we have specifically for the new model? Like we don't really have that automated yet. Now that I'm thinking about it, I probably want to now.
Yeah.
See how possible that is, like get a prompt to re-prompt it. But at the same time, yeah, it's all about measuring just like output. And so like how close can you get all your evaluations in line? And there's an easy way to just drop in a new model and see, okay, is this going to really have a measurable impact? And like typically with these big ones, it's like negligible, right? Like you might see like 0.1% or like sometimes 5% for some tasks. As they come up with new releases too, like that may get improved too, right? And so then you have to timestamp the fingerprint of the model and test that. Right. Because this whole juggling act, which I don't know, if you find the task that you want to solve, like is solved by a model, it's almost like, well, why change the model?
Right.
Create all this extra work.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I do think that this is something that's missing. There's going to be a company that comes along and kind of takes this off our hands, this benchmarking and evaluation. Because what I'm hearing from you, I hear from others as well. And it always feels like, okay, well, we have this hand-rolled thing. And that typically means that there's an opportunity there in the market that's not being addressed today.
Yeah, at Doximity too, you prefer like setting up your pipelining and evaluation mechanisms around a vendor, right? Like it's just so easy to just buy something and then plug in your data sets and then have it churn through the calculations. But really, that's all it's doing. Like all of these services, they're all around like LLM as a judge. So you pay for like the baseline evaluators to get you up and running to calculate something. And then you realize what those somethings are. And you're like, well, we want to add these specific calculations to target something. And then you realize, well, I got to build out this whole thing. And like, you'd be surprised how hard it is to like create these things. It's really just an LLM call in the end. And so like, and you can generate synthetic data even to like help insulate and cushion the data sets that you do have. So you have more data to test with that's, similar and generated in similar ways. That helps. But yeah, at the same time, you always circle back to, okay, well, we have too much custom things that we want to measure and test. And so you do just end up rolling your own out of necessity.
No, I don't think it's an easy problem to solve.
But at the same time, so we had Klaus on an episode or two ago.
Yeah.
And he presented the Leva gem, like easy way to like just test stuff in Rails. Really awesome. And so I see kind of like more of that augmented service coming out just across the board. Like I know we've mentioned Langsmith before, and that's like, I don't know if they're free anymore. They used to be free. Yeah,
they're not.
But that was the de facto, like, okay, yeah, you could just watch your traces and then like measure the impact. And, that works great for a while. And they've got some great tools. I'm not going to knock Langsmith. If you're looking to set up your eval pipeline, it's all there. I was hopeful when OpenAI had they have their own evaluations. I forget what they call it. Yeah, I guess it's just evals.
Okay.
Yeah. So they have their like own built-in version of this where you can like sample all of the requests that come in through their API and then drop them in the data sets and then run tests against them. And I think that they even have it set up so that you could take it a step further and like fine tune based on what it finds out from some of that evaluation, which is kind of neat. But it's like, I haven't had the desire to use it. And I don't know if that's just me, or maybe there's something like you're mentioning where it's like, we want to stay model agnostic. And so like, we don't want necessarily tooling that's like tying us back into the thing that's locking us into the models.
I can easily see that as well. That was kind of the first thing that I thought of with eval, because I don't want a self-reinforcing, like, okay, I've made the decision to use OpenAI. Let me use an OpenAI tool that convinces me that I got to keep using it. I also think that Langsmith has been good enough for us. I think that, Langsmith has a real advantage in being a first mover, but there are other tools available. We've stayed on Langsmith. I think there's some inertia there. We haven't seen anything that is blowing us away in terms of being better. But it's also, well, it's not Ruby. It's a SaaS product, but it's a Python first solution. And that was fine when we first started out. But as more and more of our application is built in Ruby, and in our recent turn to integrating RubyLLM into our application, we came up short in trying to do tracing and observability. And so one of our engineers went out and had to kind of roll their own tracing and observability and integrate it between RubyLLM and Langsmith. PR may be coming soon to RubyLLM, but it surprised me that there's nothing out of the box here, right? Like, because I think it is something that is just that new. And I know you've got some opinions on this. My take is that unlike evaluating in an objective manner what model is best for a particular task, that seems like a very big and onerous problem to solve. This doesn't seem like a big problem to solve. This seems like something that should be solved again and again and again, because there's a straightforward way to do it, and when you've done it correctly.
I think it goes back to, I feel like the open tracing days, right? Like, I guess we're still in them. There was this concept that spread wide and is still kind of prevalent in ways of having a distributed tracing mechanism that you just hook into your application and your language, and it just works and it tags everything, and you can do spans if you want to get more focused on details. And
that is open telemetry to an extent, right?
Yeah, open telemetry. I guess I forget the transitionary period of of each of those. Yeah, open telemetry. To me, this seems like the same problem, except we have the whole streaming thing is busting everything. There's so many failure modes now that we have to account for. And then how does the tracing tie into those failure modes?
Yeah. And you don't want the act of tracing itself to start contributing to the failure modes, right?
Right.
Because with more streaming and more ways to connect, there's more tracing.
And then the data pipelining too, right? Is it's not like you're just sifting through logs anymore. You're calculating things based on those logs. Maybe post-processing is still a thing. I feel like maybe the logging tooling had a miss here.
That's interesting.
In order to just adapt to LLM usage. Hey, just use your existing OpenTelemetry, and then, you can also sample your data and pipe this into some evals.
Yeah.
I'm honestly surprised that doesn't exist.
That's a fair point, because rarely do we need this up to the minute. Most of the time, I don't need to know how much it costs for me to run this, use this amount of inference on a model in real time. Right. But I may want to know at the end of the day, or at the end of the week, the end of a month, what are the hotspots. And another big part of this, I didn't mention this before, was that there's real cost benefit analysis. Whenever we're using the leading models, the big heavy hitters that are, paying billions of dollars to make these incremental improvements, well, they're passing some of that cost on to us. And whenever we can do something with one of the other models, whether it's open source or it's just a generation behind, we're going to save a whole lot of money. And, in our case, we're talking about continuous running. This thing is running all day long on your repository. So it adds up quickly.
We were talking with Klaus in this previous episode, and he gave the most incredible talk at San Francisco Ruby AI meetup.
Yeah.
Where it was he was showcasing the Leva gem. He used it specifically for this purpose you're talking about, to compare some, lesser model to see how it performed and also how much money he's saving, so that as a business owner, he could decide, okay, is the difference in quality worth the money I would spend on this model, right? And he was I think the example he showed was a GPT-4o mini or something versus GPT, I think it was 4o at the time. the percentage in quality loss from his evaluations were like, I don't know, 1% or 2% or something like that.
That's
and
interesting.
So he was just like, but the cost savings was like outrageous. It was
like 100% or
exactly
90%. Yeah.
And so he was like, well, obviously I can make this decision to just use the cheaper model, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like interesting to see that exposure of like, okay, cost actually really does matter. And it's like easy if you're in a bigger organization to maybe like just overlook that idea. But at the same time, like it is needless spending.
It's needless spending. And, when you're building products with AI, which I think we're going to get into, it used to be that their, SaaS model was almost like zero marginal cost. You had another user, it costs you just a couple of bytes, a couple extra minutes of EC2 or compute. And, and you're off and running, right? It used to be like, well, we can cost us, I don't know, $500,000 a year in fixed costs to build this thing. And so we need to make that up. But then every user we add that gets us over that is just profit. That's not the case I can tell you from firsthand experience, that is not the case for AI products that leverage existing LLMs, especially commercially available LLMs. The variable costs now are very high. And the famous ones in our industry, the Cursors and Kleins of the world, they lose money at just as rapid a pace as OpenAI does. They just do it in smaller quantities, right? There's an order of magnitude difference there, but they're all losing money, right? So what do? Not everybody wants to lose money. I can also tell you from personal experience. So, so what does a small and medium-sized business owner do when they've got a great idea, either internally or externally? They want to leverage the LLM. It's a continuous thing. But now you need to be able to make back that cost. And a lot of times you're doing that through some combination of price engineering, which is difficult because the loss leaders are charging just a few pennies, and managing the costs on the other end, which I think Klaus had a really good idea there. And it's something that we're starting to incorporate as well.
It reminds me of whether you hire somebody right out of college or somebody that has 10 years of experience doing something, you like to think of that as, well, this person that it has more experience is going to accelerate development of my product by this multiplier. Mm-hmm. And the cost may be more upfront, but the value from that, like you get speed. And so it's like a similar idea for like these models where you pay for the more expensive model in hopes that it's just faster at getting to what you want out of it. Even though there's all these like free workers behind the scenes that you could be running, it'll take them a while, like.
Yeah. Right.
If you spin up Claude code with like Qwen 3 or something, on your MacBook, right, it may take a few days to run something, but
but you're going to get it. Yeah.
You're going to get it and it's free. So like, I guess the time, it's funny because like all of this AI is accelerating everything, right? Mm-hmm. And so like speed is almost like the most important part if you're like trying to innovate. But if you're like truly just solving somebody's problem as a business owner, do you need that acceleration, right? Like, are you going to be dwarfed by some competitor because they're more innovative solving the same problem? I honestly don't know.
Probably not. I mean, that's not how businesses worked to date. The first entrant into the market is not guaranteed to dominate that market forever. It happens sometimes, but that's usually a business that has really worked hard to shore up what it does best and its customer service and all the rest of it. And I still think that matters. I've yet to see a case where that doesn't matter. And so I think that's it. I think that's a good point. And I think that with respect to the models themselves, the changes, well, I think what we're discussing here today is that the changes have always been incremental. And now with ChatGPT 5, we have this like mass realization or this mass kind of like understanding that, oh, hey, this was just a little incremental change. Like every time we got a new version, everybody was kind of losing their minds for either good or not good reasons. They were kind of elated by it. Now we have ChatGPT 5 and it's like, oh, okay, this is an incremental improvement, which is seen widely regarded as a failure by many people, I think, outside of the tech community. Whereas in the tech community, we're like, well, incremental's good. We'll take a little bit of an improvement here. Let's see what it can do. But the thing is that we really haven't scratched the surface of what these models can do. And so getting something that's like an order of magnitude better, that could be great, but we're not even using what we have today.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's a great point. And it makes me think, like, I remember reading the release notes on OpenAI, and there's just like so many details of the API updates as they relate to the model specifically that I think were just so overlooked. And it makes me think that it's like the Apple, like you're holding it wrong, right? Like basically everybody has to like redo kind of some portions of what they've built in order to get the optimizations that are in play now, right? And like, I have a feeling this is going to be consistent iterative cycle like this. The model may seem very underwhelming, but if you use all these other little features we've added, you're going to be really wowed.
Yeah. Do you have any examples of that, of what you read?
Oh, yeah. So one example is you can now constrain tool outputs to specific grammars. So like instead of just saying, oh, the structure of this tool is going to return this specific structure from a parameter standpoint or attributes, and instead you can use an actual grammar like Ruby. Ruby doesn't have a grammar, unfortunately. But, you know, some other languages have, programming languages have grammars, but you can make your own grammars. And they're basically just like language templates that let you like generically describe how something should be respond in a formatted way. And so like basically they made a way to make structured outputs very flexible and like more toward like language. So like if you wanted something to generate a report in a specific way, like you could just generate a grammar that is a report formatted in that way. And then all the outputs for that tool would return in that way.
Yeah, that is very cool.
So that's one example. Right?
Yeah.
And another one is like they introduced this idea of preambles. So you can ask the model to like think out loud before it makes a tool call even. So you can capture like if GPT-5 is reasoning about whether it should like call a tool, you can have it basically supply you that information ahead of time.
Yeah.
So that when you get your tool responses, when it's like, oh, you should make all of these tool calls. And it's like, this is the reason why now. Maybe you could be like, well, that reason we don't really care about, right?
Yeah.
Like that could be useful, passing it along to some tool that makes another LLM call.
You would need a human in the loop at that point, right?
Right,
or
exactly.
Another agent.
You could, yeah. I mean, if you had an agent that, you know, you wanted to approve all the tool calls beforehand by somebody, even the front end user, you could present that reasoning back to them and be like, this is why I think we need to do that. Instead of you having to be like, well, we think this is, you know, why we should call this tool.
Yeah.
You know, or just nothing, right? We're making it.
Or we already did it.
Right.
We'll send you a bill.
Another one is like, oh yeah, so you can now get like reasoning tokens back and feed them back into subsequent calls. I know they don't expose like the thinking steps you see in ChatGPT, but now you can basically get those for free if you do multi-turn responses. So if you get like a response and it has reasoning in it, you can pass that back in your next call. And it will be so close in proximity in the vector space that it can reuse it optimally. And it doesn't have to like re-reason about things again.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, these are just like small examples, I feel like, of what is to come in this kind of space. Because you think like, this is OpenAI, right? Like Anthropic has like similar API with these other adjustments that you can use their API for, right?
Right.
And so it's like back to the compilation thing, like, well, okay, well, you can't just try an Anthropic model up against GPT-5 and say, hey, can we just use Anthropic, right? Like,
so this is some way of translating the way that I prompt OpenAI over to the way that I prompt Claude to try to achieve the same result.
Right, exactly. And like, even on the API levels, maybe you use the API features differently for reasoning in Anthropic than you would OpenAI because the models are formatted and structured a different way and built differently, to be honest, right? So like, it's funny people just being like, okay, like I entered this thing in the chat GPT And look at this, what I entered in the Claude, and they're completely different. And it's like, well, it's not really apples to apples, you know?
Yeah.
And maybe from a product standpoint it is, but I feel like there's just, like you mentioned, like way too many parameters.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to circle back to the Ruby world for a minute, because you did mention RubyLLM, like integrating that. So like, how do you weigh that, right, as a product builder? Because like there's all this like hype lately about, is AI actually delivering anything? Right?
Well,
and so like as a business owner, like building AI products, how do you decide like, okay, well, we should switch to using this framework even, right? Like what is the value that that's going to even provide?
I know what you mean. I mean, there's kind of two sides of it. I'm a business owner with engineers that use AI to build an AI platform. Right. And so it's AI all the way down already.
Right.
And soon they'll just replace me with AI, and then they'll take all the money. But the decision for RubyLLM was, I suppose it was twofold. One was we're doing a lot of different work around the test generation process of Phoenix. We are trying to improve the efficacy and efficiency of Phoenix. And so there's graders that we're building and trying to analyze, okay, how good are these tests? How do we put them back in the loop to make them even better? Now, we've always had evaluations for the tests that we generate. But in this case, we want to build our own just grader, our own assessment of how good these tests come out and try to make it as deaf method-esque as possible, right? So we have our own opinions on it. I don't think they're that controversial, but they're strong opinions loosely held about how tests should be formatted today. So there's that piece. And then there's also this piece of, when we started this 12 whole months ago, there were not a lot of Ruby LLM integration options. And so we built a lot of it in Python. And so when, for example, Active Agent, we had Justin on the show, that didn't exist when we started Phoenix. And so we've always had a Ruby and a Rails application because there's a web app behind this. But the lower level, the test generation, was done in Python. So that is still the case, but more and more of the application, as we're getting deeper into the end-to-end integration of both test generation and then generating new tests for new code that's added, creating Everflame reports where we're evaluating the tests and the code as it comes in, those kind of end-to-end features, more and more we're able to say, okay, well, we want to do this with Ruby. Or in some cases, it is advantageous for us to do this in Ruby. So we went out and we did an evaluation. We looked at Sublayer, we looked at Active Agent, we looked at Roast. We started with Roast for that evaluation piece that I mentioned, which is not part of the web app. But we started Roast for the evaluation piece. It didn't hold up well. And I think that is probably because it's not being sunsetted, but I think it is not being as actively developed as it was, which is funny. We had Obi on here like 6 weeks ago, and it's like, well, things change. Things change quickly. And I think Obi himself, I could be wrong about this, but I think he's also more in favor of putting more effort into RubyLLM and seeing that become sort of the leader for AI integration. And then when we look at RubyLLM compared to Sublayer and Active Agent, I love both of the maintainers on these projects. There's not as much support. There's not as much use. And so we decided we'd plunge in with RubyLLM. And so far, so good. It's only been a couple of weeks. And as I've mentioned, it doesn't have out-of-the-box support for tracing and observability, so we had to roll our own. But we have felt like it has really added a boost. It's definitely helped us shore up that end-to-end integration. So, we're happy with it.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. I haven't had a chance personally to play with RubyLLM. I think the structured outputs was maybe preventing me from messing with it, which is now in there. So I'll probably circle back and
check it out.
It's kind of funny, like the Ruby AI gem, or Ruby OpenAI gem rather, that was our de facto like gold standard. And now it's, well, how do we get all these other LLMs in there? And it's, LangChain RB seemed promising and that works great. And then as all of these APIs evolve, like somebody's like, oh, RubyLLM, like I'm going to make all the things that I'm missing from all these other libraries and release this. And then at what point does like that just keep continuing? And like somebody else comes out and is just, oh, I'm making the LLM gem. And it's just like, this is what you use for it.
Yeah. I mean, I wrote about this, or I talked about this, and a talk that it was back in, I don't know, March. So it's probably everything I said back then is obsolete now.
Right.
But one thing that I stressed to the developers was being able to, you have to make things, modular, and you had to reduce the dependencies on your integration points because you're going to switch them out. Right. And I think that goes for these gems as well. It goes for Roast, it goes for RubyLLM, whatever you're using right now. It might be the thing that you want to use a year from now, but the chances are not good. And so for that reason, you cannot tightly couple. And, we've always been warned about this, right? Like tight coupling. But now it's like, hey, the thing that you're using today, you may not want to switch, but you want to test something new out. And you're going to want to do that over and over and over again because the field is evolving so quickly.
It does come down to just, I feel like standardization, which is so boring, especially for AI, which is like, oh, all this new, and like when it comes down to it and you're maintaining this stuff, you're just like, man, I wish like there was a standard.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you.
Thank God for Anthropic with MCP and like that actually taking hold, which is like a little weird because like there was like the OpenAI standard, which is like essentially the same thing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, okay, like everybody just get behind this one thing and then we're going to push it hard. I feel like, Ruby is great at like polar opposing both forces here, right? Like being innovative and just like doing everything all the same, all different ways. And also like kind of getting behind something eventually.
Well, because that's what Rails is, right? We could have just kept creating web apps and deciding where to put our models every single time. And Rails said, actually, you just put them here. They go here.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And there was a talk at RailsConf where this was brought up. And it was because you want to abstract away the decisions that don't matter. It doesn't matter where your models go. It just matters that they go somewhere and it's in an expected place. It's more important that there's a convention than that you can configure it. And I think there's a lot of that in AI and in this world. We may not know which is which yet, like what the most important thing is to abstract away and what's the most important thing to just let developers be creative and explore.
Yeah, totally. And it seems at this point that speed is almost out trumping long-term support in a way. I worry a little bit about it, but like, I feel like Ruby's you could just monkey patch anything,
Yeah.
You just go in and be like, okay, like this class is like, oh, we're going to eval in real time, like to do something completely different than what it was like built for. And I feel like, well, it's not maybe the best thing to do. It's like something you can do,
It's something you can do. Yeah, it's true.
Can do.
I wonder how different that is, being in the world of software engineering services for as long as I have, people have, they've committed atrocities of programming so that they can go from 0 to 1 and get their next round of funding. And the answer is always, well, we'll fix it with the next round of funding. Right. and some people actually do and commit to it. And some people don't because it's just more important to chase the next thing and chase the next vertical curve in user adoption. So this definitely, it accelerates that kind of problem, but I don't think it's a new problem.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely not a new problem. This reminds me, like, there was the hype cycle over Rails, which the hype dropped off and people are still using it. And now it's like, it's not a hype, but it's like popular, right?
Yeah.
And so like a hype versus popularity, right? And so like, where are we leading in this AI space with Ruby of like RubyLLM is a great example of popularity, right? Like there was a hype around it and now it's like really just becoming popular.
Yes.
And so like, great, use that tool. What else is coming out, right? Like what else is like, are we facing from a hype cycle perspective? We don't have to go into the coding world, agent world yet, right? But that's feel like it's its own episode.
It's coming. Yeah, it's coming. Don't worry. Tune in next week.
Yeah. But like, where does Ruby fit in that AI building business space? Like from a okay, like it's no longer hype and it's really just popular. And like, why is it a good use case, right? That we keep coming back to, right? Like it's more than just like Ruby is. It's like, okay, people are, innovating on things still, and it's like becoming a useful tool to use it for that.
I would say that we're engineers. If you're listening to this podcast, you're probably an engineer, or you're my mom. So hi, Mom. And I think it's incumbent on us to rise above the hype. That's our job, because the hype has always been there, and the hype for Ruby and even Ruby on Rails needed to dissipate. And it's okay to get caught up, but the fact is that at the end of the day, we're building useful tools that we want to stand the test of time. And that's always been, at least for me as a software engineer that takes himself seriously as a software engineer, I judge my own abilities and success on whether or not the applications I build are still around in a few years, right? They're useful, they serve a purpose. Most of the time, they either earn money or they are funded, right? If it's a nonprofit. But those tools that I build are still being used. And if they're not, I think, well, I have something to learn from that. And I think the same thing is true for us here. It is easy to get caught up in AI hype, especially when there's a new tool coming out every 5 minutes that we can go and check out. And I think it's okay to, and this is where the Ruby comes in, it's a great place to explore. We had Chad Fowler on the show, and he was talking about some other languages that might be better suited for automation or code gen with AI. And that may be true, but Ruby still is the best for the user experience of the developer, to play with things, to figure things out, to try things out. And I think it's by doing that creative work, we learn what is actually just hype and it's not actually going to be lasting for the test of time, and what is, as you put it, popular and suitably popular and serving a good function.
Yeah, hopefully more things.
Yeah.
Because, it is the Ruby nature to make things that are not useful at all and just fun.
Yeah, I think that's good. That's how you learn, though, right?
That is true. Yeah. Which is funny. I just found out about this thing called Y Day, where it's like a memorial event that happens every August 19th to like inspire the Ruby community to see how far you can push the weird corner of Ruby.
That's funny. But, the thing is that Y Day exists because everybody got something out of Y the Lucky Stiff, right?
Right.
He was being playful and he did something that was great. Okay, I'm sorry. So continue. I'm going to get off this.
But as an example, I was like, well, like, let me have a Claude, take this description of Y Day and see like what it comes up with idea-wise. And it came up with these two incredible ideas. One was around quantum Ruby. So creating a version of Ruby that sometimes executed and sometimes didn't based on your observation of it. And so like basically there would be a quantum state, and like if you were observing the code executing, then it would execute. Otherwise it would be in this weird holding pattern.
Yeah. Nice.
And then there was the Schrodinger's state of like, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't.
Right. Right.
Very much in line, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And another one was just like, what was it? It was a emoji rubber duck session. And so like basically like opening up a Ruby console where like you can use emojis to define your code.
Yeah.
And depending on the kinds of emojis you use, you could like make it run faster or slower.
So like
nice. You could like put it in angry mode, and like have more errors raised.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that.
I don't know. I feel like it's what helps the Ruby community be so popular, but also maybe how it prevents it from being taken seriously in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I mean, let's put this another way. If you're doing that, and I've got another example as well, but if you're doing that, then maybe you're resisting the urge to do something like create the next billion-dollar company with just one person, right? Like that's everybody taking themselves, I think, way too seriously. So we could learn a lesson from why, the whys of the world. And from your example, V, where it's like, hey, you know what? I built this thing and isn't it funny and isn't it silly? And we did this with AI.
Right.
And because I think that tinkering is actually really important. And I think it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. The serious notes I definitely align with the anti-pattern there. Maybe that's where Ruby really shines. It's just like that it grinds against the, draconian seriousness of everything.
Yeah, right. Look how great this thing is. We all have to become rich. We all have to, or it's got to take over the world. Like, we don't have to be in this world of absolutes all the time.
Right.
My thing that I've been checking out, I think I've mentioned this before, but if you're not already reading Scott Werner's Works on My Machine Substack, he has been churning out, I've been following it for a while, but in the last few weeks, he's been churning out this outstanding content. I mean, I think that he is one of the most creative thinkers of the usage of AI, how it works in your code, how you can leverage it. So what he released recently were these two new gems, VSM and Airby, and his post about it and why he did it and how he feels like it can be a template for artificial intelligence systems that need to iterate and loop and do all the things that we talked about on this show. Check that out. We'll put it in the show notes and give them both a try.
We're going to have to get him back on to talk about these because this is definitely the future. And I don't know how he comes up with this content because
I know
he must have a
lot of coffee. He says,
I know.
I know.
I feel like he just talks about this in his, living room or kitchen. That's how I imagine it happening.
Yeah.
But yeah, totally like the self-building runtime style nature that he's gearing toward. I think it's just what so many people have been talking about, but haven't figured out how to do it. And this is very promising.
I would put money on him to figure it out, or at least figure out some large piece of it. I don't know if this is it. He doesn't know if this is it, but this is what we're checking out.
Yeah, totally. All right. Well, we've talked about a lot.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you wanted to dive into? I feel like we've hit all the corners.
Yeah.
I guess, how do you measure AI in reasonable ways?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In Ruby space, tracing, all of this fun stuff that really isn't solved.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know. Hopefully somebody listening is going to come out and be like, yeah, you just use this thing now.
Oh, yeah. Yes. If you are that person and you're thinking, I can't believe these guys just talked about this for 45 minutes when there's an obvious answer, don't be shy. You can shout that at me on social media or, my email, just let me know.
Otherwise, we'll just keep talking about how it doesn't exist,
Yeah. Well, otherwise, we'll drive you slowly insane with this mindless chatter. All right. Well, this was great. Very happy to be on here and talking about this stuff. We'll do it again soon.
All right. Thanks for listening.
Take care, everybody.